for those of you who are just coming in, is not here today. He is traveling, so he asked me to fill in. And I love filling in and talking about administration and stewardship. So here's what I need to do. I'm going to write 3 things on the board. I don't have a PowerPoint, but this is the outline of today's lesson. So today we're going to talk about 3 things. We're going to talk about the Jethro principle. So Jethro, who knows who Jethro is? Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, Senate. You think that's real funny, don't you? I know. So we're going to talk about Jethro, not the one from Beverly Hillbillies. We're going to, what was my second one? We're going to talk about equipping, our role as enablers and equippers. And then finally, we're going to talk about personal stewardship. Okay? So these are our 3 points today. I promise to give you 3 points and a poem and an invitation at the end of the service. That's funny. That was a joke. Thank you. Thank you. Because I'm a Southern Baptist minister, 3 points and a poem, right? No? Okay. It's a tough crowd today. All right. Good to know. And it's all on tape. Awesome. So if you have your Bibles, I told you it was like a service, turn to Exodus 18. So Exodus 18. We're going to talk just a few minutes about the story of Jethro. And Jethro's story moves very quickly and easily into our second point. But there's some things that we need to draw out before we move on to our second point. So in Exodus 18, I'm reading from the NIV. It says this: "Now Jethro, the priest of Midian and father-in-law of Moses, heard of everything God had done for Moses and for his people Israel, and how the Lord brought Israel out of Egypt. After Moses had sent his wife Zipporah, his father-in-law Jethro received her and her 2 sons. So Moses is married, and he sent his wife back to live with her daddy." We'll not talk about that topic. "And her 2 sons. One son was named Gershom, for Moses said, 'I have become an alien in a foreign land.' And the other was named Eleazar, for he said, 'My father's God was my helper. He saved me from the sword of Pharaoh.' Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, together with Moses' son and wife, came to him in the desert where he was camped near the mountain of God. Jethro had sent word to him, 'I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons.' Hopefully that was a message well received. So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him. They greeted each other and then went into the tent. Moses told his father-in-law about everything the Lord had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and about all the hardships they had met along the way, and how the Lord had saved them. So Moses is saying, 'Hey, this has been great. Look at all the good news. Look at all the wonderful things that have been happening.' And Jethro was delighted to hear about all the good things the Lord had done for Israel in rescuing them from the hand of the Egyptians. He said, 'Praise be to the Lord who rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians and of Pharaoh, and who rescued the people from the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all other gods, for he did this to those who had treated Israel arrogantly.' Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and other sacrifices to God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law in the presence of God." So a time of worship, a time of praise for what God has done in the lives of the people of Israel. Now this is where the story gets important for our topic for today. Verse 13. "The next day Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people, and they stood around him from morning till evening. When his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, 'What are you doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge while all these people stand around you from morning till evening?' Moses answered and said, because the people come to me to seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it is brought to me, and I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees. Moses' father-in-law replied, what you are doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. Your work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Listen to me, Moses, and I will give you some advice, and may God be with you. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to him. Teach them the decrees and laws and show them the way to live and the duties they are to perform. But select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judges for the people at all times, but have them bring every difficult case to you. The simple cases they can decide themselves. Let them handle the simple, easy ones. That will make your load lighter because they will share it with you. If you do this and God so commands, you will be able to stand the strain, and all these will go home satisfied. Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything he said. He chose capable men from all Israel and made them leaders of the people, officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. They served as judges for the people at all times. The difficult cases they brought to Moses, but the simple ones they decided themselves. Then Moses sent his father-in-law on his way, and Jethro returned to his own country. All right, friends. So if we're talking about administration, what can we learn from the story of Jethro and Moses? What principles can we draw out of this passage to apply to our role as leaders and ministers in the church? Let me help you. So one of the things that we have to do as leaders in the church is we have to understand our own limitations. We have to understand that God has gifted us, created us uniquely, and given us certain tasks to do in the church. So we have to recognize what our task is and what our limitations are. Now listen, if you ask me to lead worship in church, you have made a grave error. It is going to be terrible. It's going to be miserable. People are going to get up and leave in the middle of the worship service because they will hear me sing into a microphone. And it will be the worst thing you've ever heard on the planet. You may ask my wife, who God loves her, stands next to me in worship every Sunday. And every Sunday, she kind of does this. So she turns her ear away from me. And she already has hearing loss to begin with. So, it's really bad when she's turning her ears away from me. So it's no good. So you're not going to ask me to lead worship. Now, if you want someone to create some sort of program or system or handle some of your administrative work, sign me up. I'm your guy because my brain thinks that way. I pay attention to details. I like to read policies. I worked for the Florida legislature for about 9 years. I helped to write laws. So I like how that sort of process works. So if you want an administrator, I'm your guy. If you want a musician, I can't tell an E flat from a G sharp. Are those actual notes? A flat, G sharp. Okay, good. I have no idea what those are. Couldn't even pick them out on the music sheet thing. No clue. But you want to talk to me about writing a marriage policy to meet the needs of current law and balance what our requirements are in the law versus what our requirements are in Scripture. We can sit down and we'll have a conversation that'll last for a couple of days because that's what energizes me. So we have to do what we're good at. I have never understood why we insist on being martyrs to what we hate to do. God has created us and gifted us in unique and different ways in the body of believers. I'm never going to be the one who stands up and plays the guitar on Sunday mornings. I'm not good at it. I don't know how to do it. It sounds like torture to me. The idea of having to learn how to do that, no thank you. But there are some people in this very room who you say, please don't talk to me about writing a policy, but you want me to write an updated hymn? Okay, yeah, sounds great. Lock me in a room with a guitar and a piano, and I'll stay there for days. Because that's how God has gifted us. So there's no reason for me to say, I'm going to be a minister, so I've got to learn how to play the guitar. In the 90s and early 2000s, the rule was if you were going to be a youth minister, you wore cargo shorts, you had spiky frosted tips, and you played the guitar. That was some of you are going, it's 2016, not much has changed. John Davis back there is going, what? I wear cargo shorts. I'm kidding. So that's what you had to do. I didn't want to do that. That was of no interest to me, no value to me. That's not how God has equipped me or gifted me, so I'm not going to do that sort of thing. What God has gifted me is to be the guy who sits in the office and is boring and reads policy manuals and helps manage the church from behind the scenes. You know, when growing up in church, some of my heroes were Jonathan's armor bearer. Anybody know his name? No. No one knows the name of Jonathan's armor bearer. Scripture doesn't tell us. But Jonathan's armor bearer was the guy who was carrying Jonathan's armor and who said to Jonathan, you know what? We're going to attack the Philistines. You lead. I'm right there with you. I'm the guy who stands just to the side and back a little bit, and that's my preferred role. I like being there because that's how God has equipped me. That's how God has gifted me to be in that supportive role. Let me hold Moses' hands up all day long because that's how God has made me. And I recognize that and I understand that about who I am as a leader. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't stand up in front of a classroom or stand up in front of a crowd and have to give a talk or teach a lesson. That's kind of what I'm doing right now, right? It doesn't mean that I'm not a leader. It's just that it means that I have figured out my leadership style, who I am, and what my role in the body, in a local church body should be. And so I'm not trying to be the worship pastor. I'm not trying to be the senior pastor standing up there on Sunday mornings. That's not who I am. That's not who God has made me to be. Now, can I exegete a passage? Absolutely. Can I write a sermon? Without question. I've had all the classes. Ask me anything you want to know. That was funny. Because, you learn everything in a classroom. Tough crowd this morning. So I can write a message. I can preach a sermon. I can do that process, and I enjoy it. But what I really enjoy is helping administer the functions of the church on a day-to-day basis. Building relationships among deacons and committee members and helping committees do their work. Those are the sorts of things that I enjoy. So working in a Southern Baptist church is perfect for me because we've got committees on committees on committees. So I enjoy that sort of thing. So I understand how God has made me and equipped me. Jethro went to Moses and said, listen, I get that you're the leader of this nation. I get that God has put you in this position, that he has given you this task. But God has not put you here to kill you. God has put you here to lead the people of Israel well. And you need help to do that. There are good leaders among the people of the nation who can come alongside you and help you, serve with you, and help make those decisions. Now he said, let them make the little decisions. where Senet's chicken is attacking Benjamin's chicken and kills Benjamin's chicken, and now Senet owes Benjamin a chicken. John Davis can make that decision, right? He can handle that one. But Senet's son went over and punched Benjamin's son, and they fell down. I know, it's about to get testy. And they fell down, and Benjamin's son's leg is broken, and Senet's son's arm is broken. And so now we've got a bigger issue than just a couple of chickens, right? So now we've got to bump that one up a little higher. But then Benjamin's other son is really mad at Senet's son, and he's got a broken arm. So Benjamin's other son comes along and starts fighting Senet's son with a broken arm, and he does real damage to him. And he's permanently scarred. Doesn't kill him, but there's very, very real long-term damage that's been done. So Moses has to arbitrate that issue. That big one comes to him. Can you think of issues in the church where some of the deacons can maybe work it out, or some of the leadership in a Sunday school class might work it out? But then there are issues where the pastor might need to come alongside and say, hey, let's navigate this together. How can we walk through this one together? So that's what we do as ministers, is we understand our role and our function, and then we help others to do their job. And so this is where we become enablers and equippers. So let's go back to the fact that I can't play the guitar. What I am going to do, if I'm a leader in the church, is I'm going to say, okay, we need a guitar player. And we have a guitar player, and we're not letting him lead on Sunday mornings. We're not letting him participate in worship on Sunday mornings by playing his guitar. Why not? What's going on? Is his life, or is he posting things on Facebook that don't need to be happening in his life? Are there some things going on? Why are we just not letting him lead on Sunday mornings? What's keeping John from leading in worship on Sunday mornings? Because we need a guitar player. We need him to do that. He can do it. What's keeping him from doing it? If it's something that's going on, if there's some, he's posting on Facebook about having had a little too much to drink at the bar the other night, we probably need to have a conversation with John and say, hey, bud, let's talk about what it means to be a follower of Christ. Let's talk about what it means to be someone who is a committed follower, who's going to live a life that's above reproach, who's going to lead a life that others say, oh, I get it, he's a follower of Christ. Now, I'm not passing judgment on drinking or not drinking or those sorts of things, but you're all seminary students, and you've all signed a covenant, which means you should not be drinking while you're in seminary. So let's just make sure we're all clear on that one, since I'm on video. And they can see your heads nodding in the back, so you make sure you nod along with me. However, so we see John's from New Orleans. He went to the LSU game. He got real excited because LSU finally pulled it out against State, tragically. And Les Miles ate some grass, and so John's really excited about the win over Mississippi State, and he has too much to drink, and then he shows up on Sunday morning, and John's trying to be a good believer, and he's trying to do good work, and he's trying to be a follower of Christ, but we might need to come alongside John and say, okay, listen, let's talk about this. We see what God is doing in your life. We see the gifts and the talents that you have. We see how God has equipped you. But we need to have a conversation about a couple of things so that we can begin to see you fulfill the calling that God has for you. So that we can begin to see God use you in the ways that He has gifted you and equipped you, right? So it's our job as leaders, as administrators in the church, to come alongside the Johns in our church and say, hey, let's talk about what's going on. Let's talk about why you have too much to drink on Sundays. Let's talk about why you spent a little too much time and money at the football game and drank a little too much over the weekend. because we want to enable and equip our members to be the leaders in the church that God has called them to be. Right? Now, just because they're a follower of Christ, let's clear this up real quick. Just because you're a follower of Christ does not mean you have to sell all your possessions and go be a missionary in North Africa. Just because you're a follower of Jesus Christ does not mean that you have to serve in a vocational church position. It doesn't mean that you have to be called to ministry. I was talking to someone just before this class about a friend of his who's studying chemical engineering. There ain't nothing about chemical engineering that sounds exciting to me. The very idea of having to study chemistry formulas makes me want to poke one of my eyes out. That sounds like torture to me. Miserable. Awful. But God has equipped that person to be and to think and to manage that whole chemical engineering process. Thank God He's equipped someone to do that. Because we need that, right? We need someone to do that. I'm a big fan of an architect and an engineer getting the bridge right. Right? What happens if they built the Crescent City connection and they said, oh, it should have been 100 feet and we only made 90? You going to make that 10 feet jump over the river in your car? No. God, it depends on the car, maybe. Right. Yeah, maybe we'll leave. But, or, if I've got the Mission Impossible theme song going and I'm in a convertible and I'm like, yes, then maybe I'll think about it. But generally, I drive a Ford Escape and it's a solid no on making that 10-foot leap. So we need engineers, we need architects, we need accountants, we need these people to do their job and to do it with excellence. We need ministers to do their job with excellence. And part of our job as ministers, as administrators in the local church, is to help enable and equip other people to use the unique giftings and talents to honor and glorify God. That's our job. Because if we're sitting in the Moses seat all day long and people gathered around us and we're the one doing all the work, we're not enabling the people in our church to work out their gifting and calling before the Lord. And I would submit to you that we're being sinful and we're hindering them from using their gifting and honoring God with the sacrifice of their talents. So it's incumbent upon us as leaders in the church, as ministers, as people who are taking on those leadership roles, to enable and equip the people in our church to use their gifts and talents before the Lord. And if we're not, we need to take a step back and say, okay, what am I doing as a minister? How am I serving? How am I a leader? What are my leadership styles? What am I doing as someone in the church to enable or hinder people from working and serving the Lord in the way that He has called them to? If I try to be the worship pastor, I'm going to hinder the worship of the local church body. Because that's not what God has gifted me to do. That's not what God has made me to do. Somebody has got to clean the toilets in the church. Somebody has got to be the janitor. And I would submit to you that to be a good leader, sometimes it's our job to clean the toilets. Sometimes it's our job to do those small, what we imagine to be small and menial tasks. So when Moses was acting as judge, he navigated the Senate Benjamin chicken attack issue of 2016. He said, we've got to deal with the chickens attacking one another. But he also dealt with the issues of people stealing, people physically harming each other. He dealt with the small and the big. So sometimes we as ministers, we do need to deal with those small tasks, those menial tasks. Our people need to see us doing those things that they can't imagine the pastor doing, that they can't imagine the worship leader doing. They sometimes need to see you doing the hard work that goes into the functions of the church. So I currently serve in a church of about 75 to 100. In that church of 75 to 100, they need to see me going up into the attic and pulling decorations down for children's events. They need to see me being willing to grab the mop and clean up the foyer where someone spilled coffee on Sunday mornings. Not because I need them to affirm me as a good servant of the Lord. Not because they need to affirm me in my role as the pastor or staff member. But they need to see that I'm willing to serve them in every single way. And I'm not doing those things to receive accolades. I'm not doing those things to prove a point. But I want the people in my church to know that we're all called to do the work before the Lord. And it doesn't matter what's happening. If I want a church member to give up their time to volunteer at an event, they need to see me serving them and working hard alongside of them. If I'm supposed to work an inflatable for an hour at the Fall Fest, they need to see, if I want them to do that, they need to see me doing the same thing. Not just sitting back, greeting everybody and glad-handing everyone. They need to see you doing work. Sometimes we don't like that, do we? I'm the minister. I'm supposed to preach and teach. Now, we do see that in the New Testament, don't we? We see the apostles gathering together a group of servants to handle some of those day-to-day functions of the church so that they can commit themselves to teaching and preparing and leading, right? And that's important and valuable. And so we see the beginnings of church staff. We need all people to serve in the church in the way that God has gifted them. Listen, if you've got an accountant serving in your church, why in the world are you trying to handle the books for your church? You need to pick up that phone and call that accountant and say, listen, I know you get real busy. I know you have a lot on your plate. But can we maybe work out how you can help us with the finances and the financial books for the church? How can we work together on that? You need to be talking to that accountant in your church. If you have someone in your church who manages a construction crew and you've got a building project, you need to call that construction manager. Let them lead that. Don't try to do it yourself because you're the pastor and you've got to do the pastoral thing and lead everything that's happening in the church. No. Allow that person to do the task. Allow that person to take leadership. It changes the dynamics of the church when we as leaders enable people to use their gifts and their talents to serve in the ways that they know how to. Right? Thoughts? Comments? What do we think about that? Right. So if we're allowing the people in our church to serve and use their gifts and talents well, then they're going to feel more confident, greater ownership of what's happening in the local church. more comfort and more confidence in the ministries that are going on in that church, and they're more willing to invite people in. They're more willing to have others, their friends and family, come and participate in this thing that they are enjoying, that they're a part of. They're going to be more willing to invite others in to be a part of this thing that they're investing in, that they're leading, that they're taking part in. So you want to grow a church? Let the people in your church work and serve and use their gifts. They're going to invest, and they're going to bring others along to invest with them. Make sense? Am I telling you how to build a rocket to Mars? No, it's not rocket science. These are all common sense things, but sometimes we get so caught up in the day-to-day business of what we've got to accomplish that we forget, you know what, there are people in the church who can do this job just as well or better than I can. So one of the things that my wife and I are learning, I've been married almost a year. In October 17, in fact, it will be 1 year that I've been married. So if you have any questions about marriage or what it means to be married, you come and talk to me. I'm an expert. And if you believe that, I've got some beachfront property in Arizona for you. So the thing is, Vanessa and I have learned that we need margin, that we need some space. We need margin in our lives so that we can do the things that we need to do as a married couple, like go to dinner together, like have some time together, spend time with one another, invest in each other. Now, we don't have children yet. That conversation is later. Mom. We've recently talked about when we're going to have children. And I keep reminding her, you've got 5 grandchildren already. You don't need any more from me right now. Just go be somewhere else. So Vanessa and I, when children come along, it will be even more important that we take time for ourselves. Because I cannot be a good parent if I'm not being a good husband. She can't be a good mom if she's not being a good wife. Because let me point something out to you, and I'm going to get on a little bit of a soapbox here for a second. We have it kind of backwards in the West. We think the children are the priority and that children should take precedent over our spouse. That's wrong. Your spouse is your first priority. Your job is to lead your family well, beginning with your spouse. You invest in your husband, you invest in your wife. That relationship is the priority. Because when you're being a good husband or a good wife, then you can be a good parent. Because you are being fulfilled by your spouse, you can now invest in the ways that you need to in your children. So I'm going to step off my soapbox now, so make sure you guys get that right. But as ministers, we've got to create margin in our lives so that we can invest and manage the things that we need to be doing in our spiritual walk, in our personal relationships, in our marriages. So Vanessa and I, we've taken some things off the table. We've removed some responsibilities, some tasks, and we've said there are other people who can do this. There are other people who can do it well, and that we trust to do this because we need to allow other people to work while we take some rest. Now, it doesn't mean we've taken everything off of our plate and we're not working or managing the responsibilities that we have, but we've realized that if we keep all of these things on our plate, then we're, one, not going to be able to invest in each other the way we need to, but two, we're not going to be able to allow others to serve in the way that God has called them to serve. So it's twofold. So we've taken some things off of our plate. We've given ourselves some space. We actually get to take a Sabbath rest. Rest is just as important as work when it comes to ministry in the church. Now, it doesn't mean that you as a minister don't get up and go when someone calls and says, hey, we're going to the hospital, or we're dealing with this issue, or we are having a funeral. But it does mean that you create some time where it's for you and your family, where you're serving your family, where you're leading your family. But I would submit to you that in the midst of that, that for you to serve your family well as a spiritual leader, you need to be showing them what it means to minister to others. So I'm not saying take your son on a 3 a.m. run to the hospital, but involve your children into the ministry that you're doing. Bring them into that. If you're a parent, let them participate in the ministry that you're doing. That's important and valuable, and it teaches them not to be that typical preacher's kid, but it teaches them how to be a good follower of Christ, and it teaches them how to be a good minister to others. Don't you want to be the one who models ministry to your children? So, what are you doing to teach them how to be good ministers? Johnny, this is how you be a good minister. Or, Johnny is sitting next to you when you're ministering to that family that's lost a loved one. You teach your children. You manage that process well. So we equip people to do their task, what God has called them to do and gifted them to do in the church. But also to be a good manager, we've got to create margin in our lives so that we have time for rest, reflection, time to withdraw and spend that season with the Father. Do we see Jesus ever withdrawing and spending time with the Father? Yes. On a regular basis. Consistently, Jesus withdrew from the crowds. Jesus went up to the mountain. Jesus sent them on ahead. Jesus took time to spend with the Father, so he knew what he was supposed to be doing. So if it's good enough for Jesus, you think we need to be doing it too? Yes. If Jesus needs to spend time with the Father to make sure that he's doing the Father's will, don't you think you who are not the incarnation need to spend time with the Father? Did I hurt your feelings just now that you're not the incarnation? Okay. We need to be spending that time with the Father. And if we're doing too many things, if we're sitting in the judgment seat all day and people are gathering around us, we're not able to spend the time with the Father that we need to. If you're a preacher and you stand up in the pulpit every Sunday, if you were running and running and running and running and running and going from one task to the next to the next to the next, have you taken the time to prepare? Have you taken the time to reflect on what God is speaking through his word to you? So how in the world are you going to stand in the pulpit on a Sunday morning and tell the people, thus saith the Lord, if you've just pulled a file out on Saturday night and reread your notes? If you are not investing in your time with the Father, you are not going to be able to be the minister that you need to be. If you want to hear more about this, you should go hear Dr. Strong's sermon from a couple of chapels ago. Excellent sermon about creating margin and having your identity rooted in Christ so that you can be the minister that you need to be. Excellent sermon. I'm continuing to reflect on it a couple of weeks after he preached it. It was that good and that significant of a message. So you should go listen to it. Oh man, I'm chatty today. Okay, so the last thing that I want to talk about, and then maybe I'll let you out early because I'm sure Joe's running out of tape back there. That's my hope, right? So, he says, no, I've got plenty. One of the things that's very important to me, so I have a couple of roles here at the seminary. I'm an adjunct instructor for Level College. I work in the assessment and accreditation office, but one of my primary responsibilities is to serve as the director of a grant program that helps students manage their finances well. So personal stewardship is very important to me. If you are not managing your finances and your time well, you cannot manage the finances and the activities of your local church well. Your first place of responsibility is your home, your finances, your time. If you're not managing those well, you're going to have a real hard time being the minister that you need to be in your church. And you're going to be able to do it well for a season, but at some point, your lack of attention to your personal finances and your personal time is going to catch up with you in that time at your church, and one is going to run into trouble. You're going to find burnout. You're going to find temptation is a lot easier to give into. You're going to find that you're more willing to compromise in excellence. If you are not managing your personal finances and your habits well, you're going to have a real hard time doing it in the local church. So, the very first thing that I want to challenge you to do as ministers is to start using a budget. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands because I know the answer, because I've surveyed incoming students for the last 3 years to the seminary, and the overwhelming majority of people who arrive here to be trained for ministry do not use a personal budget on their finances. Stop that. Stop that right now. You leave this class, you go to chapel, you go to your afternoon classes, and then you go home and you sit down and you make a budget. You figure out how much money you have coming in, how much money you have going out, and if you have more going out than coming in, start cutting. I see lots of cups that have different logos on them from Starbucks and Chick-fil-A and PJs, and some of you are starting to hide your cups from me because I'm calling them. Stop spending money you don't need to spend. Stop mismanaging your finances. Please, I am begging you. We see in my office students who have thousands and thousands of dollars of debt. Student loans, credit cards, medical bills, mortgages, car loans, you name it, I've seen it. So the state of Louisiana, Southern Baptist in Louisiana, how many megachurches do you think there are? Let's just do percentages. What do you think the percentage of churches over, let's cut out even the megachurches. What do you think the percentage of churches over 200 members is in the state of Louisiana? Southern Baptist churches. 8%. How many? 8%. No. I said 2%. Higher. 5%. 5% of Louisiana churches have members of 200 or more. For our purposes here at the seminary and in Southern Baptist Life, we define smaller membership churches, those churches of 200 members or less. The overwhelming majority, roughly 90% of smaller membership churches, have a minister who serves bivocationally. Bivocationally, friends, that means you got more than one job outside of the church. When was the last time someone told you that ministry was part-time? And that you could do ministry part-time? Please. Give me a break. Ministry is never part-time. So 90% of Southern Baptist churches that are 200 members or less, and their ministers serve bivocationally, do you think that you're going to be able to pay off thousands of dollars of debt in a timely fashion without compromising your ability to live in some way? No, you are not. Management of your personal finances is so key to being a good minister, to being a healthy minister. So I'm going to stop saying good. A healthy minister. Because you are going to be overworked, stressed out, concerned about how you're going to pay your student loan bill, how you're going to get little Susie and Johnny braces, how you're going to pay for that cheerleading outfit that Susie Q wants because she wants to be a cheerleader for the middle school football team. How are you going to manage those things if you're not managing your personal finances well? Now, don't hear me passing judgment on you and saying there's no hope and you can't do it. There's a great deal of hope. First of all, you can stop going to Starbucks. That'll save you about $5 a pop. Don't stop drinking coffee. Lord knows I'm not going to tell you that. But you can make it at home. It's a lot cheaper to do it that way. It costs about $6 for a canister of the French roast or the French market coffee, and it's gray coffee, and it comes in a little decorative canister that you can use later on for storage. I don't care, whatever. But buy coffee from the grocery store. Make coffee at home. You don't have to go to Starbucks. If you want to make a latte, figure out how to make a latte. You don't have to buy it. Begin to manage your finances well. Begin to consider what impact does that $5 cup of coffee have on my ability to serve the kingdom. When you begin to put a kingdom focus on how you spend your money, you'll really rethink that $5 cup of coffee from Starbucks. When you begin to consider what you can do with the $20 a week that you're spending at Starbucks, you really begin to consider, am I managing my finances well? So Vanessa and I sponsor a Compassion Child. That's $40 a month. At Christmas time, we spend a little extra money and we get him a Christmas gift. And around his birthday, we spend a little extra money and we get him a birthday gift. But for roughly $40 a month, 2 weeks worth of Starbucks, we sponsor a Compassion Child. When you begin to think of your finances in that way, it really begins to change what you spend your money on and how you let that money go out of your budget. You really begin to consider, do I need to spend money on that? Do I really need that new pair of shoes? Do I really need that book? Do I really need that cup of coffee? Now, if you look at my Facebook, you will see me post about how much I love my wife and how much I love eating. And depending on the day, we'll determine which one I like more. Don't tell her I said that. So, yeah, I'm on video. Great. Don't show this to her. Excuse me. That's Jesus saying, stop that. So I love to eat. And you'll see me posting about a restaurant that we go to, and you'll say, oh, look at Chris with his budget, and he's spending all that money on eating out. You're right. We do go to restaurants, and we like going to restaurants. But we save, we prioritize, and we choose what we're going to spend our money on. You might want a pair of shoes every week. I don't. I've got like 4 pairs of shoes, maybe 5. I'm from Florida. There's always a pair of flip-flops hanging around. But we've prioritized what we want to spend our money on. We've also prioritized what we want to do with our money. Vanessa and I want to travel. We want to go on some mission trips. So we save for that. We plan for that. We prepare for that. We manage our finances in such a way that we have prioritized what's important to us. Spending time with friends, hosting people at our home, that's a priority to us, so we prioritize that in our budget. We manage our finances well because we want to be able to serve the kingdom well with our personal finances. If you are managing your personal finances well, You are going to manage the finances of your church well. Because you have prioritized how you function in your personal budget, you will prioritize how you function in your church budget. And you will lead your people to do the same. Your responsibility as a good administrator in your church is to help your church manage its budget well. Not only manage its budget well, but its resources well. Do not tell the people in your church that you need 75 volunteers and 50 of them are wandering around going, what am I supposed to be doing? Manage well. Manage your resources and your priorities and your budget well. Because those 50 people who are milling about at the event going, what am I supposed to be doing? They're annoyed at you. You told us you needed all these volunteers. We're not doing anything. What am I doing here? Equip them to serve well. Help them to serve well. If you need 25 volunteers, find 25 volunteers. If you need 50, get 50. But give them a job. Give them a task. Help them to see their purpose. Manage your resources well. Your task as an administrator in your church is to manage well. You want people to value your time, value their time. If you say a meeting is going to last 20 minutes, bring it in at under 20. Bring it in around 18. Manage your time well. Respect the time of others. Listen, I know we're in South Louisiana, and that means we operate on our own sort of clock down here. It's South Louisiana time, and we kind of show up when we want to, and we stay as long as we want, and it's just Louisiana time. I get it. I'm from Florida. We call it beach time over there. But we just kind of, no problem. But be respectful of people's time. Be respectful of other people's resources. You're paid to be at the church event because you're the staff member. They are there as a volunteer. They're giving up their time to come and volunteer at things going on at the church. Be respectful of that. Be conscientious of that. If you're going to be a good manager, manage those sorts of activities well. It's not rocket science, friends. It's being conscientious and using common sense. Now, I'm not giving you the keys to the kingdom here. There are so many different things that go into being a good administrator in your church. But if I can give you anything in this brief time, it's don't take on all the responsibility for yourself. Pay attention to what Jethro says to Moses. Find good, capable people in your local church, and then equip them and enable them to do the work. Don't micromanage them. Don't tell them that you want it done this way, and this way, and if they don't do it this way, and this way, that you're going to get mad at them. Let them do it. It's okay if they don't do it the same way that you would. You are not God. You do not have the only way to do the job. And if you're going to be a good administrator in your church, you need to be managing your home well. That's why when it talks about the qualifications of a minister and of a deacon, it talks about the management of their home. Deuteronomy 6 tells us that we're supposed to train up our children and we're supposed to point them toward loving God with all of their heart, with all of their mind, with all of their soul. That you're supposed to do that when you put them to bed at night, when you're walking down the road, when you're going through the life that God has called you to live. You're supposed to train your children well. Your first priority in ministry is to your family. I'm a firm believer that you need to be ministering in your home well, and when you minister in your home well, you will be ministering in your local church well. But sometimes we divide those too quickly and there's too hard of a line between the two. Vanessa and I are committed to the idea of our home is your home. Our home belongs to the people that God has brought into our lives to host them, to minister to them. Our children will see people in and out of our home on a regular basis because we want them to see that God has given us this resource, so we're going to use this resource for His kingdom. But it's the wise management of our resources. There are going to be times where if you say, hey, I need something, I'm going to say, absolutely, I'm right there. And there are going to be times where my wife says I need something, and you say I need something, and my wife is going to get what she needs, and you're going to wait. Because that's my wife. That's my first place of ministry. She needs me. I need her. That's a priority. So we manage our priorities well. We manage our resources well. If you are not making a budget, go make a budget. Let me give you a resource. Mint.com. Any of you heard of Mint.com? Mint.com. If you've taken a prep class, you have heard of Mint.com. So this is a great resource. She's rude. She's obnoxious. She sends snotty emails to you along the lines of, hey, you've spent too much money in this category this week. Hey, you should stop spending that money on Starbucks and those sorts of things. But she's a wonderful resource. I don't know why I think she's a lady, but she is. So Mint.com, go use this as a resource. You can load, so if you have credit cards and savings accounts and checking accounts, you can load all of those in there, and it organizes it for you so you can see what you're spending, how you're spending, how much money you have in each of your accounts, how much money you owe. It'll help you make a budget. It'll help you prioritize in your budget. So use this as a resource to begin to manage your budget. It's also free. That's the best bit. Dave Ramsey has some great resources. I recommend some of those. However, Mint.com and Dave Ramsey's Every Dollar Budget work very similarly. However, to get some of the things that Mint does for you from Dave Ramsey, you actually have to pay for it. So that's why I always recommend Mint.com to seminary students, because I know you ain't got more than 2 pennies to rub together. So go use Mint.com as this resource to help you manage your finances, manage your budget, and prioritize your spending. It's an excellent resource. It will really help you begin to see what you're doing with your money. And I'm a firm believer, I cannot say this enough, if you're managing your personal resources well, you will be able to do it well in the local church. God has put us steward over these things in our lives. We don't own them. We are stewards. What's a steward? A manager. Does the manager own it? No, he doesn't. She does not own what she is managing. She is a steward over it. God has placed it in His care. And what's our responsibility as a good steward? To use it wisely, to grow it, to advance it, to do well with it. We're not just stewards of our money, we're stewards of our time. We're stewards of our family. We're stewards of our relationships. We're stewards of our ministries. We need to be managing those things well. We're called to be good stewards. And I think as administrators in the church, that is our first priority, to be a good steward of what God has placed in our care. If we're a good steward, we will be a good administrator. If we're a good administrator, we will help people in our church to fulfill the calling that God has placed in their lives. If we're going to do it all ourselves, we're going to have real problem in our personal lives, in our ministries, and in our relationships. Fair enough? Comments? Questions? Anything for the good of the body? All right. The Mass is ended. Go in peace and sin no more.